Hello, Star Trek fans. Welcome to ReBinge It. This is the ReBinge Star Trek Voyager podcast. My name is Kim.
And my name is James.
And we are rebinging Star Trek Voyager from the beginning, one episode at a time. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are on Season 2, Episode 16, Meld. This episode aired February 5th, 1996. Before we talk about this one, which is serious and intense,
yes,
anything to say about last week's episode, which was ridiculous and comical in Threshold?
That was one of the funniest podcasts we have ever recorded.
How much laughing did you have to cut out?
I had to cut out a lot of the parts where there was literally minutes of us just laughing at how silly some of the stuff was. It was a lot of fun to record. Hopefully people will enjoy that one.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. Just to laugh about a thing we all love. But you can't ignore how just crazy that episode was.
Agreed.
Well, and this is the weird show, I think.
Yeah.
We talked about it before. I know I've put it on the Facebook group, but this is the one that's got just weird episodes. And that one was weird, but it was also just terrible at the same time.
Yeah.
Oh, but we move on. It's given us decades of humor.
Oh, it really has.
From Star Trek, yeah. And Prodigy had the best joke about it. Again, if you haven't watched Prodigy, I don't know what you're doing here, but there's a really good joke in Season 1 about the salamanders.
I'd love it if Lower Decks went and revisited the whole salamander thing. That could be absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, I think they made a joke about it, right? But we were like, they should go back to that planet.
Right, yes.
Yeah, that would be quite funny.
I am completely down with that.
All right, well, let's get started on this one.
We open on Tom playing pool with Harry in his dive bar holoprogram, and Tom hits upon the idea of running a lottery for replicator rations. The winner is the person who guesses the radionic particle count at 1200 hours the following day. Tom will only be taking a minor handling fee, and there's a very positive reaction from the crew, and pretty much everyone in the holodeck wants to get in on it.
They must be desperate for entertainment.
That's what I was thinking. I have some comments on that. Off to the mess hall, and Neelix is bothering Mr. Tuvok, who's trying to sit quietly alone and read, and wishing him a happy Calrec, which apparently is a Vulcan holiday, but it is not for another 2 weeks.
If you want to sit quietly, you shouldn't sit in the mess hall.
No, not with Neelix around. Tuvok explains that Calrec is a day of atonement, solitude and silence, to which Neelix comments, all of your Vulcan holidays are the same. You can picture it, can't you?
Yes. Well, we can't be happy, so...
Today is extremely solemn.
Yes.
Oh, there's probably a Vulcan well actually there, where he would say, some of the holidays are about silence and solitude, and others are about solitude and silence. We learn Neelix has been doing some research on Vulcan holidays, telling Tuvok he will not rest until Mr. Tuvok smiles. Neelix then brings up the Vulcan Rumeri, and Tuvok basically rolls his eyes, describing it as a pagan festival. And it does sound like it's some kind of Vulcan fertility festival. He goes on to explain it has not been observed for over a millennia, when it does sound a little bit too much fun for Vulcans, so that would make sense.
Yeah. Neelix is barking up the wrong tree. He would improve Tuvok's morale if he just left him alone.
Fortunately, B'Elanna calls Tuvok away to engineering as Neelix describes how he's been thinking of having a Romeri theme for the mess hall, which I think sounds wildly inappropriate.
Yes.
I think if Neelix wanted to hold something truly Vulcan, he should hold something extremely austere.
Yes.
We will be dimming the lights and everybody will be talking in quiet voices and there will be no emotion for a whole day. Tuvok would probably like that.
He would.
In engineering, B'Elanna opens a conduit, showing Tuvok a very cooked-looking arm inside. And we don't actually see the rest of the body, but it's pretty clear whoever it is not doing very well.
No, very Murder, She Wrote opening. It was a lot like that, too, on Bones, where it would open with them finding some remains, usually bones, obviously, and then the show would start.
And we go into the opening credits. I never really followed Bones.
I don't think you were the target audience.
Tuvok is now briefing Janeway along with Chakotay and B'Elanna. B'Elanna reports there was only one person in engineering when Darwin came on duty. Darwin's the dead guy. And that was Lon Suder, At the sound of the name, Chakotay immediately appears to become uncomfortable. He explains how he's never really been comfortable with Suder. B'Elanna describes him as doing what he had to do a little too well. When Janeway inquires, what does that mean? Chakotay just replies, killing Cardassians. Chakotay goes on to explain, in the Maquis, a lot of them were protecting their families. But Suder had his own reasons, and Chakotay didn't know what they were. In battle, he'd had to pull Suder back a couple of times, and from the look in his eyes, he knew he was close to killing Chakotay.
Chakotay.
Tuvok, quite correctly, brings up that being an appalling leader, Chakotay did not include any of this in his initial crew evaluations.
Right.
Chakotay tries to dodge responsibility by saying he doesn't put down hunches or bad feelings in his crew evaluations.
But he thought this guy was going to kill him. I mean, come on. And he obviously had violent tendencies.
Right. He defends Suder, saying he did his job in the Maquis and has done his job on the ship. Wow. Is that not an absolute dereliction of his duty to write correct reports and evaluations on who these people are?
Yeah, like usual.
Oh, I skipped the bit about him really enjoying killing Cardassians.
Yeah. Or about me being concerned that he's dangerous.
Right. That's exactly the kind of thing you would want to put in the report. Especially when you're dealing with the Maquis crew, who, as the Doctor, I think it is, says later in the episode, mercenaries, cutthroats, and outlaws. So they start the investigation, and Tuvok is now interrogating Suder, who doesn't give anything up. He just talks about the work he was doing and denies killing crewman Darwin.
In the pitch dark. Why is it so dark?
Tuvok trying to intimidate him, maybe? Making it a little bit like a torture chamber?
Oh, I have in my notes many times. Why is it so dark in this room? Like
you could turn the lights on.
I don't know. I think this is the first time. It's super dark. And also, you get this sort of sensation that Suder has black eyes.
Yes, I think he does.
Yeah. But you see it later in detail, but here it's kind of from a distance.
Yeah.
And it's creepy.
So notice here, Tuvok is right out in the open here saying about the killing. I would question, why would they let this get out that it was a murder? You'd think you'd want to keep this quiet as an accident. And basically have it set up as, look, we want to conduct an investigation to figure out what went wrong with our processes. And not give up the fact that, oh yeah, we know it's a murder. We're looking for a murderer now.
Well, yeah, except it maybe allows him to ask a little bit more pointed questions.
Oh, so you think that being a stickler for the rules, there would be Starfleet conditions that you couldn't ask certain questions unless it was a murder investigation. And of course, being a Vulcan, you would want to stick to that completely.
Right.
That sort of thing.
Yeah. But I agree with you that you'd think you'd want to keep it quiet because the Maquis would all get super defensive.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Although in this case, it was correct, so.
Well, as you just said, Suder is a little defensive, saying he knows how Tuvok feels about the Maquis, that he was going to turn them over to Starfleet. And we get a great piece of Vulcan here, as Tuvok replies, that did not require any feeling on my part. And I really like that because the way Tim Russ says feeling, it seems very deliberate to put an kind of an emphasis on it. Yeah. Almost like he's mocking the concept of feelings or has disdain for it. Which again, I think is a wonderful piece of the Vulcans betraying their true feelings about things. Of, oh, we're not emotional, we're totally logical. But when it comes to him saying that, it's like, there's disdain there. Which would be an emotional response.
I guess I don't know if I read it that way.
Yeah.
It was almost more like he was trying to explain something to him.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you could be right. He can talk about this later in his podcast. But isn't he trying to explain to Suder that he doesn't hold any kind of grudge against him because he has no feelings?
Yeah.
Isn't that what he's doing in that moment?
I think that's an interpretation of it, but I think the fact that he put emphasis on that word.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right.
I think if he delivered that completely flatly, it would have played differently, but that's how I saw it.
Okay. Gotcha.
Ultimately, Tuvok doesn't really get any answers from Suder and he dismisses him. Almost immediately, the doctor calls as he's found DNA inside the skull of the victim. And we go to Tuvok showing a data pad to Suder. Suder thinks for a moment and then gives it up. He killed Darwin with a 2-kilo coil spanner. And it's great to see that they're using metric even for murder weapons.
And again, it's super dark in here.
Yes.
It reminded me of that episode of Deep Space Nine where everybody's talking through the curio cabinet, remember?
Oh, right, yes.
This is similar because you're going, why are you doing that? And the same here. Why is it so dark in every room?
Are you saving
It
power?
doesn't make any sense.
Oh, okay. Maybe headcanon. Remember they were talking about the plasma conduit that failed? So why the guy didn't get vaporized because the conduit failed and they found the body. Maybe they're having power issues, so they're running on low power.
Okay. Because it is actually dark in most of the rooms, but not all of them.
Yeah.
Like, not when he's talking to Janeway.
True. Well, you want to keep the captain's lights on.
Maybe Suder's black eyes can't take the light.
Oh, that's a good take.
They're really just giant pupils. He needs it dark. It's like permanently dilated.
That raises the question. Have we seen this with any other Betazeds?
Not to my knowledge.
Right.
There have been other Betazeds, but no. None of them with black eyes are having to have the lights dimmed.
Yeah.
Maybe it's from the Mirrorverse.
Oh,
Remember that?
That would make perfect sense.
We learned that in season 1 Discovery, that the light is different. Yeah.
So he has a secret side to him. He's actually a mirror universe Betazed.
I mean, that would fit with this story.
It really would. I mean, that's one of the concepts of the mirror universe if it's populated by rather violent, nasty individuals.
I cracked it, Tuvok. I found the motivation.
There we go. And that wraps up the episode. Kim's figured out the motivation.
Oh, yes. Solved. Solved the crime.
Tuvok really wants to know what the motive is, and Suder just says, no reason. Tuvok continues pushing, and eventually Suder just adds, I didn't like the way he looked at me, which seems to cause a lot of consternation with Tuvok, who just really doesn't get the idea that that's literally all it took for this guy to snap.
Right.
Off to sickbay again, and the doctor confirms that the spanner is indeed the murder weapon. Tuvok is very confused or irritated about the motive for the killing, telling the doctor, a crime must have a logical purpose. With the doctor, they rule out Suder being a psychopath, but there are physiological indicators suggesting that he has a violent or aggressive nature. But the doctor explains this is typical of the other Marquis crew, describing it as, it obviously takes a certain personality type to be attracted to the life of an outlaw. Something I noticed here, the doctor said the other Marquis crew, implying it's all the Marquis crew. Aren't some of them, including Chakotay, fighting for their homes and their families and against the crimes committed on them by the Cardassians? It seems a little bit of a leap to say anyone who opposed the Federation's sellout to a violent race is an outlaw with these negative personality traits. Some of them would be very genuine people fighting for, their homes.
Right, but they've probably been closer to that sort of personal violence in the recent times before they got sucked into the Delta Quadrant. So does that then show up differently in these scans? Or are these just DNA scans and he's just saying...
Well, that's what I got, that these were fundamental characteristics of all the Marquis crew.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
Right. We know that not all of them are going to be mercenaries or outlaws.
No, but if they all have PTSD from hand-to-hand combat, I could see that impacting them in a different way that perhaps the Starfleet personnel, people like Harry, who just basically walked out of the academy and got on this ship, right? I could see that he wouldn't have any of those markers. But if we're talking about actual DNA markers, now it's like, okay,
But if it's just from experience, then Harry would have the same problems having been killed in one episode and thrust into an alternative future in another.
Yeah, but not forced into hand-to-hand combat where he's killing people. He hasn't had that.
That's true. But it seemed like a bit of an overgeneralization.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but you are correct.
After all of this, Tuvok is determined to find the motive, and the doctor warns him that there may be no motive, and he's trapped in his own Vulcan logic. There's some great dialogue and delivery here from the doctor, where he says, all of us have violent instincts. We evolved from predators. Except me. I've just been programmed by you predators.
That was funny.
Oh, the doctor is great in this episode. Because the other thing he does is when he's talking to Kes and she's reading the scans and making an evaluation, he's like beaming as she's giving all the right answers.
Yeah, he seems really pleased with her. Do you think Tuvok is determined or is he obsessed because it's something he doesn't understand, or is it just because he can't see the logic? He can't find it. Yeah. And that makes him crazy because Vulcans think everything has logic.
Yes. I think that's what they're playing into here. And the doctor is emphasizing this, that Tuvok believes there has to be some kind of reason because that's the only logical explanation. and is stuck in this loop of there's no explanation, but there must be a logical explanation.
Well,
granted, you would think after the years of Tuvok's experience, he would have run into this before, but it could quite literally be this is the first time he's ever run into this. He's not in an environment where he sees this type of behavior.
Yeah, that I believe, but don't the Vulcans already think humans are barbarians?
Well, they're overly emotional creatures.
Okay. Well, then I don't know what he's stuck on. Or, well, maybe that's what's bothering him is the lack of an emotional piece to this puzzle. Whereas the guy's like, nah, I just didn't like the way he looked at me, so I killed him. Rather than, he was invading my space or something that actually makes him emotional and upset. In this particular case, he's not seeing what the emotional connection is. Maybe that's it.
That would make a lot of sense because it does seem like there's no real motive to the thing. There's not even any emotion behind it.
No, he doesn't seem to care at all what's happened.
Yeah.
He's a little bummed he got caught.
Well, yes.
Beyond that, he's just like, whatever.
So yeah, that coupled with the fact that this is outside of Tuvok's range of experience. So yeah, I guess, he gets into this spiral of obsession, which Vulcans aren't supposed to have, of trying to figure out what happened.
Right.
That's pretty much exactly what Tuvok says. I do not accept that explanation. The other thing I think here is Tim Russ really manages to convey how extremely uncomfortable Tuvok is. It's like the body language, even though he's, remaining very emotionally calm, makes it seem like he's unsettled. It's like you can see the discomfort.
Yeah, there's a lot of little markers in this episode of Tuvok acting strangely.
Yeah.
Some big ones come later, but yeah, he's really out of his comfort zone for this whole episode.
In the brig, Tuvok is now questioning Suder again, saying he wants the truth. But Suder just tells him he's killed people before who weren't in Starfleet just because of the way they looked at him. He doesn't feel any remorse, even though he's a Betazed, and he says he doesn't even feel his own emotions. Are we sure he's not a psychopath?
I was surprised by that. It seems like this would have come up before. So if he has no ability to feel anybody else's feelings, that means he's not really a Betazed, or he's, I guess...
genetically damaged Betazed?
Yeah, and why wouldn't that have come up or shown up on the scans or something?
Yeah, if the doctor has the detailed medical record on these people or has scanned them, etc., which he's done, wouldn't that have come up if he's not like normal Betazeds?
Yeah, this all is suspicious. Like, with Seska, she was purposely avoiding all the scans.
Yes, yeah. Or maybe it's literally something that doesn't come up in scans unless you're another Betazed. So if there was another Betazed there, they'd be going, I can't feel any emotions from this guy. I can't telepathically sense him. It's like, unless you had another Betazed, there'd be no indication that he was different.
Creepy. This is the scene where we get the close-up view of Suder's eyes, and you see that he's wearing black contacts.
Yes.
And I was like, why?
Before Tuvok leaves, Suder says he guesses he's lucky. The Federation don't execute people.
He probably is.
Now, this is where I bring up Brad Dourif. His portrayal of Suder is... I would describe it as slightly disturbing.
It's very disturbing. Yeah.
The guy seriously gives off just this really creepy vibe. And he's giving this character this really odd intensity. Like, at one point, he's really laid back and seems quite calm. And then he's really intense. And then goes back to being calm. It's really great work.
Well, and you sort of sit on the edge of your seat the whole time, waiting for something. Like, you're waiting for him to explode or something, but it never happens, which is even creepier.
I always talk about actors who just get the brief. Brad Dourif gets the brief.
Did you know he played Wormtongue?
Yes.
I did not know until I was doing my notes last night, and I looked him up and I went, oh, that's why he's creeping me out.
Oh, yeah. He was great in Lord of the Rings, too.
That's my least favorite character.
Again, he plays the character so well.
So creepy.
Tuvok leaves, but in the corridor, he stops and goes back. Returning to Suder, he says, it's important that he understands why he killed. He wants to mind meld with him.
Now, did it first occur to him after he left, or was he already thinking it, and then he left and went, no, that was a good idea. And then he went back.
I thought it was after he left.
After he was walking down the hallway?
Yeah, I think he was doing the Vulcan thing and running through all the logical possibilities and hit upon, I could mind meld with him.
And it's funny because we talk quite frequently about how ego just causes so many problems.
Yeah.
You would think it would be logical, Mr. Tuvok, for you to consult the captain instead of just going right into a mind meld with a murderer. But also, the Vulcans are like, oh no, mind melds are easy, breezy, no big deal, we do it all the time, I have it totally under control.
Well, and the other side of it as well, of it being outside Tuvok's realm of experience.
Yes, not only is it outside of his area of expertise to deal with a murderer, it's not another Vulcan. It's a Betazed.
That's true.
And Betazeds are empathic.
Telepathic, yeah.
Well, they're empathic, right?
Yeah. Oh, so they're loaded with emotions.
Yes. So for him to just think this is another day at the office is quite illogical.
Oh, excellent.
Where's Majel when I need her?
Or Savick quoting regulation.
Anybody.
Yeah.
Any Vulcan to start quoting regulations.
Tuvok explains to Suder what the mind meld would mean, and Suder just says, "Mind meld with me, Lieutenant? I wouldn't recommend it." Oh, honestly, I laughed out loud at that. I was like, oh, nice delivery.
Like, you don't want what's in my head.
Yeah. Tuvok says he's not worried, as he has internal processes that will allow him to control the violent instincts.
Mm-hmm.
Suder agrees to this, and the mind meld begins. Into a, this isn't going to end very well, dramatic ad break.
Right.
Again, another great little scene. And I like how even Suder warns him, I wouldn't recommend it.
Look, he knows there's something wrong with him.
That, I think, is the most disturbing part. The fact that Suder knows exactly what he is and the way he has been able to hide it. And then even before the mind meld, Suder is seems prepared to die. It's like, I got caught. You'll kill me. Game over.
Yeah.
It's just, I honestly can't think of a more disturbing Star Trek character.
I'd have to think about that for a while, but yeah, he is pretty disturbing.
I mean, there's people like the Collector who kidnapped Data. I mean, he was, he didn't care about people, but he wasn't trying to hide what he was necessarily.
But that Phage guy that kidnapped B'Elanna, they kidnapped a bunch of them and then was trying to do whatever he was trying to do with B'Elanna.
Yeah.
He was pretty creepy.
Yeah, he was creepy, but they were also doing it for what they thought was a higher purpose. And on top of that, also to keep themselves alive.
Oh, that's true. Okay, yeah, that's a good point.
They were almost like space vampires.
He wasn't just a psycho, yeah.
But this guy is like, I just like killing people, and every so often I just have to.
And really, those are usually the scariest villains when they're so calm.
Yes.
But also so dangerous.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's almost, in some ways, I wonder if it was inspired by Hannibal Lecter from the books. Off to Janeway's brightly lit ready room, and Tuvok is briefing Janeway, telling her the mind meld was successful, and that Suder is a very violent man. He's even surprised he was able to suppress his nature for so long. They discuss what to do with him, ruling out keeping him in the brig. I don't know why. And Tuvok brings up how Suder is actually prepared to die for the crime. This really surprises Janeway, who, in full, very stern Janeway mode, tells him she prefers to rehabilitate, not end his life.
Maybe this is an over-analysis discussion, but do you think Tuvok felt that way before the mind meld or only after?
I think it's completely after. I think this is all fallout after the mind meld.
Okay. Because as I was watching it, that hadn't occurred to me. It was the first time I thought of it was just now.
Yeah.
But you're probably right.
Janeway's plan is to confine Suder to his quarters with maximum security containment. Tuvok is not thrilled with this idea, bringing up that Darwin's surviving 3 sisters may not agree with this course of action. Janeway asks Tuvok if he's feeling any ill effects from the meld, and he does admit he's a little disconcerted, but he refuses to take any time off. And I think this is where Janeway should order him to see the doctor and force him to take some leave.
Yeah, because he's not acting normally in this scene.
This is my next point about Tim Russ's acting. Did you notice the pacing?
Yes, the pacing, and Janeway noticed the pacing, and especially the way he was wringing his hands. At one point, she looked right at his hands, because that was strange.
Yeah.
And then there's also a thing that happens towards the end where he's stopped pacing, and he's just standing there, but his shoulders are twitching.
Yes.
And you're like, well, that's not normal.
Yeah, and he's constantly sort of shifting as well while he's standing.
Yeah.
This is great. This is unlike any way we've seen Tuvok portrayed before.
Yeah.
And if you've watched the show, this is so noticeable.
Yeah, it is. And it starts off like really noticeable.
Yeah.
And then when he stood still and tried to be completely
Right.
still and he couldn't do it, at that point, Janeway has to be going, wait a minute.
Right.
He's not comfortable in his skin, but she takes his word for it that he's like, oh, no, I got it.
And that leads into my question. So you think Janeway noticed it?
I know she noticed it because she looked at his hands.
Ah.
She looked right at his hands when he was wringing them. And then back up at him, and then, she's like, maybe you should take some time to meditate.
Right.
Which is good advice.
Yeah.
I mean, too late, but yeah, I think she noticed.
I think she should have forced him to take medical leave and see the doctor.
I agree. That's one to talk about in Leadership Corner.
Back in the mess hall, Tuvok's reading again, and Neelix comes to disturb him, trying to make him smile. Neelix even pokes his finger on the side of Tuvok's mouth, pulling it into a smile while saying,
Oh.
I just want to smile.
No.
But Tuvok, who repeatedly tells him to leave him alone, just snaps, grabbing Neelix by the throat, pushing him against the wall and strangling him, finally releasing the lifeless body to fall to the floor. And then, fortunately for Ethan Phillips, Tuvok ends the program and we see it was just a holodeck simulation.
Yeah.
I still remember from when we originally watched this, just how absolutely shocking that scene was.
Oh, really?
Yes. That was like what is happening here?
Did we think Neelix was dead?
Well, they brought people back from the dead after something terrible's happened, and it's been like, oh dear, it's fine, but they survived. So
yeah.
I thought it could have been something like that, but wow, that was something else.
Yeah.
I think that's another red flag for Tuvok's behavior here.
Yeah. There ought to be, we talk a lot about alerts that should come up from the security system. And there ought to be alerts that, when someone is killing someone in the holodeck, the captain should be notified.
There's a later episode with B'Elanna in the holodecks, and it's like, shouldn't somebody be getting warnings about these?
Yeah, didn't we say in the last episode that security violations or obvious lack security would be a reason to drink? So I'm just going to say, drink.
We return again to Tom's lottery.
This B story.
And the computer isn't giving out a winner. And in comes Chakotay, telling them no more winners. Tom tries talking his way out, but Chakotay says, you're a senior officer running a gambling operation and skimming profits. That's a very negative way to put it, offering a service to the crew, Chakotay.
Just killing the vibe.
Yeah. Chakotay confiscates the pot, to much groaning, and tells Tom, the captain has put a lot of faith in you, Tom. You even had children together. She'll be disappointed.
Oh, yeah. That's not what happened.
Well, he does tell her that the captain would be disappointed. Chakotay puts Tom on report, and Tom is really flippant here.
Mm-hmm.
But Chakotay just ignores it and leaves. Should we save this for Leadership Corner? I assume you have something to say about that.
Well, it's hard to take this B story very seriously.
Yeah.
Because it's like just a few seconds of it here and there within this really serious episode. And yeah, you can't let something like that go. But you also shouldn't do what Chakotay would normally do, either walk over and punch Tom in front of everyone else, or go back and be super negative to him in front of everybody else. He should take him aside and have a conversation with him. But he's got a problem with Tom.
Yes.
And what is he doing about it? Nothing.
Not handling it
It's his job
correctly.
to fix it. It's not Tom's job to fix that problem.
Yeah.
It's Chakotay's job.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel he shouldn't have let that go, and that almost needs to be a private dressing down of Tom's behavior. Also question whether the writers get the meaning of being on report. It doesn't mean filling out reports.
No.
I think there is a purpose to this, though. I think it's showing that Tom has a tendency to slide back into his old habits.
When he's bored.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Or if he sees maybe a predatory opportunity where he can prey on the others and basically skim the profits. And I think that's the piece to me that Chakotay is missing out on, of, like you say, having that private conversation with him, maybe dressing him down and pointing out that, Tom, is your goal to slip back into all the things that got you into trouble, of all the negative sides of your personality, and appeal to him in that way and say, are you determined to screw up again?
The trouble, though, is Chakotay doesn't have a relationship of respect with Tom.
Yeah.
So I don't think Tom gives a crap what he would have to say. If Janeway had the conversation, it might have a different effect.
Right.
But this, of course, is why Chakotay is such a bad leader. He's made no strides in that area with Tom.
Yeah.
So because of that, Tom has no respect for him. So he's just flippant, in front of the other crew with him. And it's like, you got to do something about it, but you can't solve this problem by yelling. You can't just go and pull him aside and start yelling at him and then think, you have to respect me. That's not how humans work.
Yeah.
So I think this is just kind of another example of where he's failing as a leader.
Right. He needs to build that relationship with Tom, even though he personally does not like Tom because of the Marquis background.
Because that's the point. It has nothing to do with him, right?
Yeah.
With Chakotay, this isn't your feelings that are important. What's important is that Tom is a social character that people like.
Oh.
So you have to work with him to get him to understand his value, and the way that he does stuff affects other people. This is a conversation I have with a lot of people. When we use the word leadership, they're like, well, I'm not an executive. It's not my job. It's like, no. Leadership is not just people who are managers or executives. Leadership means if somebody can see you or hear you, you're showing them how it's okay to behave. And Tom is showing everyone, here's how it's okay to behave.
Right.
That's the conversation that Chakotay needs to have with him, but it wouldn't work right now because he's no relationship with him.
That's a good analysis. Okay, I like that. All right, where are we?
Back to the brig.
Back to the brig, and Tuvok comes in to see Suder, who now seems strangely calm.
Yeah. Puts his hands behind his back.
Yes. Wasn't he meditating as well?
In the pitch dark. Because every time we go to him, it's dark. Just in case you didn't know, he's a bad guy, so it's dark.
There's a great part here where Suder tells Tuvok it must be difficult knowing violence the way he knew it. And Tuvok explains that he's suppressing his violent tendencies as Vulcans do.
Everything's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
I'm fine. You're fine. It's all fine.
Right. And Tuvok says about how he's studied violence, and Suder just says to him, studying it and knowing it are two very different things. And he also explains to Tuvok how violence, in its own way, is attractive. And we get a great line from Suder as he says, it's ironic that he can share with Tuvok, of all people, what he's kept hidden his whole life. The whole exchange is so good because the roles are literally flipped. You can see Tuvok is twitchy, he's struggling with something, he seems almost emotional, and Suder is just flat.
Yeah.
He is calm, and I think he even says...
creepy.
He feels he can, look from outside into his violent nature and control it. The acting between these two of literally flipping the roles is fantastic.
Right.
After leaving, Tuvok enters his quarters and places a security seal on the door, then deletes his security clearance, and has the computer inform the captain he is no longer fit for duty.
That was big.
Cut to Janeway lifting the security seal and entering Tuvok's quarters with a security officer standing behind her with a phaser out.
And again, so dark.
Yes. Tuvok's quarters are completely trashed and he's lurking in the shadows, telling her he's counted the number of ways he knows how to kill someone. And before she entered, he'd reached 94.
Great. Jeez.
Yes. Tuvok is looking extremely sweaty and agitated. Normally that's Kess's role.
That's right.
In sickbay, the doctor is examining Tuvok, and there's definitely a problem with his psychosuppression systems, possibly caused by an incompatibility with the Betazed telepathic neural center.
Yeah.
This is exactly what you said, Kim, these are different races. How do you know how it's going to work?
Not cautious enough.
The doctor laments that mind melds go wrong more often than Vulcans would care to admit, which you just know is 100% the truth.
Yeah.
They never go wrong. Merely something did not go quite the way it was planned, but it did not go wrong.
Oh, yes. Logic your way out of it.
Yeah. Fortunately, there's a recommended treatment, but it involves first taking away his natural ability to control violence. If it works, his own neural controls will take over again. So they revive Tuvok, and he's totally changed. He's now emotional, laughing, and even describing himself as feeling strong, powerful, and euphoric, commenting, "This is how my ancestors must have felt."
What is creepier than Tuvok laughing?
Oh, yes.
I mean, geez.
This is disturbing.
Yeah. There was a moment before the doctor started the treatment where he was going on and on about how nobody ever tells the doctor anything. And Jane was like, oh my God, could you please just get to the point? It was almost an eye roll.
Things pretty much immediately start going badly.
Oh, yeah.
As first of all, he threatens the doctor, violently throws a chair at the force field, and then begins mocking the captain. He continues, saying, sparing Suder's life is a sign of weakness, and she disgusts him. All you humans do. Wow.
Now, when I first watched this, I was like, I think it would be really hard to get past that, to get over that, right? Because, okay, I get it. We took away all of his things suppressing emotions. But what that means is this was behind those emotions, right? Now that you've told me that that's probably not what he was thinking before he did the mind meld, now I can see maybe Janeway would be able to go, okay, that he was broken in more ways than just having his suppression of the emotions removed.
Right. Tuvok is on a very ranty roll and says Suder deserves to die as justice for the family, and offers Janeway a radical suggestion: release him and he'll kill Suder for them.
That's not a bad idea.
Yeah. There's still 30 seconds of the treatment left, and Tuvok attempts to use telepathy on Kes, but they've disabled that too.
Oh, that was so terrible. The whole scene is terrible.
Oh,
he does a lot of damage in 3 minutes.
Right.
Why did they even let Janeway be in there? They should have said, you just leave. He's just going to rant as we take away his suppression abilities.
I think an important part of this is because Janeway has had such a long relationship with Tuvok.
Yeah, I suppose.
She still looks at him as a friend, even if he's like ranty, crazy man. So I could see if you were concerned as the captain, and this is a trusted member of your senior crew, you would want to be there if you could.
Okay.
The extremely irrational Tuvok now bellows for them to release the force field and forces his hand into it, but it's not budging. The doc counts down the seconds, and the treatment ends with Tuvok passing out.
This just happened to Janeway last week, remember?
No.
Yeah, because Tom was behind that containment field as well, and he was trying to get through and get at her. She must be like, what is happening?
Doctor, I'm just going to take these from the bridge in future.
Yeah, why not?
The doctor informs Janeway he doesn't know how many treatments this will take. It may work in a day, a week, or never.
You could have mentioned that before we started. Oh, this might never work. What?
In a darkened sickbay, Tuvok wakes, then painfully pulls off the neural devices stuck on the side of his head and uses one to remove a power conduit and short-circuits the force field.
Security alert. Drink.
I would question, though, why you wouldn't have security.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Security alert.
I mean, on top of everything, he's still a security officer. He's very experienced. Vulcans are a little tricky.
Yep.
And he's very smart.
And he's very strong.
That's right. Yes, Vulcans are naturally stronger than humans.
Right, and he can take more pain than humans.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, I feel like I pointed this out before. I think it was when Seska was in sickbay and was doing something in the dark.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
The doctor is a program. He could literally be on all the time. There's no reason for him to be off in this scenario.
That's a very good point.
Where he's got a dangerous patient.
Yeah.
In sickbay. Why would they turn him off? I mean, no guards is unforgivable. At the very least, the doctor should have been on.
Maybe not even guards. Maybe somebody in case he has some kind of medical seizure or problem.
Yeah. Okay, good point. So many things wrong with this scene. But I get it. He had to get out. Okay.
Well, the next part of the show, I think, is probably some of the most intense scenes in Voyager we've seen to date. Resistance was close, but this is just beautifully performed by two serious actors.
Mm-hmm.
Cutting out to Suder, who's still in the brig and meditating. Hearing a noise, he calls out to Tuvok, and we see has disabled the guard.
Not dead, I hope.
Suder asks, "Have you come to kill me?
And could you turn some lights on?" He actually walks out of the pitch dark. It's like, what?
Tuvok just replies, "To execute you for your crime." And Suder is so calm here. Again, a complete reversal of what we saw before. Chilling. Suder comments, "A most logical use of violence to punish the violent." Tuvok drops a containment field, and Suder just walks straight up to Tuvok, saying, "We both know I'm prepared to die, but are you prepared to kill?"
How did none of this ever turn up on any kind of evaluation? This is not normal behavior.
Tuvok says, "This is for justice." And Suder asks, "Justice or vengeance?" Continuing, he says, "I promise you one thing. This will not silence your demons. Be prepared to yield your entire being to it, to sacrifice your place in civilized life, for you will no longer be part of it, and there is no return." Tuvok grabs Suder's head in the classic mind meld way, telling him, "I seek no return," and begins a mind meld. This meld seems to be taking a toll on the both of them. They both seem in pain, but Tuvok releases him, falling to the ground unconscious. Suder calls the bridge, telling Chakotay Tuvok needs help. And then, in a really strangely touching way, he props Tuvok up, carefully holding him while they wait for help.
I know. It's so strange how he really seems to care about Tuvok.
Yeah.
It's wild, because it's like, is this because this is maybe more his normal state when he doesn't feel like killing people? Or is it just that he feels connected to Tuvok because of the mind meld?
I think it's 100% because of the mind meld.
Interesting, yeah.
Here's my thoughts on it. Doing the mind meld, it actually gave Suder a way of controlling his tendencies. And he actually says about how he feels like he's on the outside looking in at his violent nature. For the first time, Suder is actually feeling, if you like, in control. So that line he gives earlier about, you of all people understand me. So he has, if you like, a connection to Tuvok.
Yeah.
He does care about Tuvok.
So interesting. These are the levels kind of that I liked about this episode, because now we're talking about Tuvok really had the impact that he wanted to have on Suder, right?
Yes.
But he had an unexpected impact on himself that was nearly catastrophic.
Right.
And that is so interesting when you look at it like this could happen to a person who is overly empathetic.
Yeah.
And who really put themselves last in trying to help another person and then ends up helping that person but damaging themselves. But in this particular case, this is a person with no empathy because he doesn't have, well, he has emotions, but they're suppressed. And he went a little bit too far, maybe because of ego, not because of empathy.
Yeah.
And he ended up helping the person and then damaging himself. There's just so many layers that you could look at, if you sort of peel the onion on this one.
Oh, absolutely agreed. This is such an interesting episode to watch.
Mm-hmm.
We get a quick log from Janeway. Suder has been incarcerated in secure quarters, and Tuvok remains in sickbay. The doctor reports that because Tuvok was unable to complete the act of murder, his suppression systems are working again. He's recovering. A very weak Tuvok apologizes to Janeway for his inappropriate behavior, saying, "I was most insulting to you."
And she says, "I've been insulted before."
He concludes saying he has great respect for her and considers her a friend. I really like that, especially the pause before he says friend. Is that emotional? Is that an emotional connection there? Friendship?
Well, I mean, he's not completely fixed yet.
Yeah.
So a little bit of emotion is maybe coming out.
Yeah.
But it might even be confusing to him.
Yes.
Oh, we're friends.
Right.
Like, that hadn't occurred to me before this moment when I could suppress it.
Right. I think a pure Vulcan way would be to say, you are a very efficient and effective colleague.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think he has said that before, right? About somebody, I can't remember. But no, it's a really interesting moment. And Kate Mulgrew is also really good in it because we've talked before about her face acting.
Yeah.
And the look on her face when he says that, she must have been thinking all along, like, I don't know how this is going to go. Are we going to get this guy back?
Right,
and then he says that and she's just like, oh, damn it.
Very softly, Janeway tells him that means a great deal and he should get some rest. She turns back before leaving and says, in the very stern Captain Janeway mode, Tuvok, no more mind melds without my permission. Understood?
Yeah. Not even with robots.
He nods weakly, and with her hand on his shoulder, Janeway just smiles. The end.
She says something there, I can't remember the exact context, but she says something in this scene about, we don't have to talk about that right now.
Yeah, oh yeah. She does.
That's too much. We don't need to go there.
Yeah, it's after he was apologizing.
And I wondered exactly why. Was it because she's like, this should not be an emotional scene?
Yeah.
Because we're worried about your recovery. We're trying to get you back to what you were.
Oh.
And if the two of us start blubbering, this is not going to be good for our future relationship.
Right.
Or is it just because the writers are like, nah, we don't want to explore that. It's too much. Because imagine the conversation they could have had. It could have been great.
Well, two sides of it. One, I think it would work on both ways. I do think that you would probably want to stop him experiencing intense emotions if he's going through this recovery phase.
Might cause a relapse.
Exactly.
But okay, this is going to be a little bit of overanalysis mixed in with a little bit of leadership corner.
Yeah.
We say this thing at work sometimes, which is never let a crisis go to waste.
Yeah.
And I think she's got to at least to some degree be thinking, this is an opportunity for me to really advance the way that he looks at the crew and the way that he looks at things. If we had a serious conversation right now while some of his guard is down, I could get across to him, because this is what I do all the time. I'm always trying to convince people to pay attention to how other people are feeling and how other people might react, because that helps you as a manager to motivate other people and get the most out of them.
Yeah.
So this is an opportunity for her to talk to him about, look how these emotions impacted you and your actions.
Yeah.
And how, you were negatively motivated to go off and nearly kill someone. But think about, in humans, they can't suppress their emotions like that. So think about how those emotions affect what they do every day.
Oh.
So to me, this is a great opportunity to have a deep conversation that might help him learn how to better deal with humans and lead the humans around him.
Do you understand now how emotional creatures think, behave, what those feelings are?
Or does instead... We don't talk about it. He goes and does his podcast later, and he says, man, I had some emotions for a while. That was a waste of time.
This reinforces why emotions are negative.
Yes. Yes. I am back to being the way I'm supposed to be now. The captain was a blubbering mess.
I would hope this would give him a learning experience as a Vulcan, and you should embrace it as a Vulcan, that you have learned something from this.
You should. You should write a book. You should do something. Don't let this crisis go to waste. There's so many lessons to be learned. Ultimately, it helps you so much.
Right. There's another side of it as well, which is, remember how he said this is how his ancestors would have felt?
Yeah.
How many Vulcans actually feel that?
Yeah. Not many, probably. Not many.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that leads me on to Spock's brother.
You're talking about Sybok from the movie?
Yes, that's it. Star Trek V, right?
Yep.
Of how he was an emotional Vulcan. Is this what emotional Vulcans are like?
well, but they took away all of his abilities to suppress emotions.
Yeah.
And they also took away his telepathic abilities. They took away everything.
Yeah.
So I don't know. And don't forget, he was also impacted by the murderous crazy person in the mind meld. So no, hopefully this is not what they're all like. I got to imagine they're probably all just sort of bigger jerks when they have emotions.
Oh, that's funny.
Okay, it's time, I guess, for overanalysis, although I feel like we've done a lot. But
yes.
I assume you have some.
I have a few things.
Okay.
I mean, one is the way Suder appears to be acting like a completely different person. I guess this kind of makes sense. If he spent his life hiding behind a facade because he's a violent murderer, and then suddenly he's then in complete control and calm and rational, he would basically be like a different person.
True, yeah.
And the reverse with Tuvok. When his emotions are released, he becomes this crazy, scary, ranting guy. I could see how Janeway would get past this, because it really is. He's not Tuvok. He's something else.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, although a lot of the behavior happens sort of outside of her sight.
Yeah.
Except for the sort of really extreme stuff that was going on with Tuvok.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you're right. And if she listened to, even though she rolled her eyes, if she listened to what the doctor was saying, that mind melds go wrong, maybe she can also look at it that way. Like, this is just a mind meld that went wrong. And that's not really Tuvok.
Yeah.
To me, one of the most interesting moments in the whole episode, it's when Suder picks up Tuvok from the floor and holds him.
Yeah.
And it's just like, well, that was unexpected.
I know.
Yeah. Just such a shift.
Right. Yeah. I think it shows the impact that it had on Suder. And it also kind of ties to Janeway's point of, I'd rather we rehabilitated this guy than killed him.
Because maybe he actually can be.
Yes, that almost proves Janeway's point of...
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
This negative side of him. It doesn't have to be that way.
Except they can't, sacrifice I don't know if they have any other Vulcans, but they can't sacrifice other Vulcans to save him.
They have at least one more Vulcan.
Okay. I don't know how you remember all of Voyager, and I don't.
Next thing, I think they need to have, when Tuvok's recovered, obviously, a conference, a sit-down with Chakotay and probably B'Elanna as well, and go over the other marquee crew members and see if there's anything that maybe Chakotay left out.
Yeah, Chakotay, what else have you kept to yourself?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know if Chakotay could prove himself any less reliable if you tried. Especially seeing as how infiltrated Chakotay's command was. I mean, are there any other races in there? I mean, he had...
Good point.
Yeah, is there a Breen in disguise or one of the other aggressive races in the Alpha Quadrant?
That is a good point.
I think my final point here is, so the lottery, should they be holding one anyway? Just a small one, maybe like one ration is all you're allowed to put in for one of the crew, and you hold it
just for fun
weekly, and you hold it as a sweepstake, and it's run by, one of the senior officers without kickbacks.
Yeah, no kickbacks.
Yeah, and you don't let the pot get too big, and the person nearest, so it doesn't have to be dead on, and it becomes a little entertainment thing. So it might be a good distraction or an entertainment for the crew that's relatively harmless, and somebody could get a nice meal out of it. I would think that might be a positive thing.
Yeah, as long as nobody's getting a kickback, it's not really gambling, right? It's just something fun to do.
Right, and if you run as an official thing...
Yeah, why not?
It seems like harmless entertainment.
Yeah, it's almost like giving little gift cards to people.
Oh, yeah.
When they do something great or whatever. Yeah. It's like, oh, here you go. You get an extra ration. Yeah, why not?
And that, I think, wraps it up for me.
I kept thinking through this whole episode, because of how calm Suder was.
Yes.
Or even, maybe not calm.
Yeah.
I kept thinking that he was actually doing something. I kept I waited for him to explode, but I also thought maybe he was doing something to Tuvok. And that at the end we were going to find out, that he knew all along. It was going to be some big devious thing.
Yeah.
And it's just so funny that that's not at all how they played it. If they had done it that way, that would have been the sort of trope.
Yeah.
But instead they did something just completely different. And they left that guy, really... That even kill thing happened the whole time, but at the end, you could feel that somehow his empathy had increased a little bit.
Yeah, he actually had empathy.
Yeah, it was wild the way they did this. That's why this episode is so interesting.
I would agree.
I do think the performances in this episode are really good.
Yes.
Brad Dourif is really good. Tim Russ is really good.
Yes.
Kate Mulgrew is really good. I'm not sure about everybody else. I do think the B story was dumb. There's a...
Oh, I kind of like the B story.
Oh, I really thought it was dumb. And part of the problem, I think, too, was at the beginning, in the very first one, because we open there. We open in the bar.
Yeah, we open in the dive bar.
And Tom has his holographic girlfriend.
A different one.
And the actor is so bad at when he is supposed to, kiss this girlfriend like he cares about her.
Uh-huh.
He does it. This is not the first time that's happened. Anytime he has had to have one of these girlfriends, he cannot commit to being really interested in this other woman. It is so funny. And so it's like we kind of started off there. And then I just thought we kind of veered off the road with it. I don't know. Maybe it's because the tone is so radically different between what's going on in the rest of the episode and there, but also that's part of the reason why you do it, is because it's almost like...
You want a counterpoint to the seriousness of...
Well, you want to break it up. Like when you're eating a block of caramel, you can't just eat the block of caramel. You have to have some nuts in there to sort of break it up. It's the same, it's the same kind of thing. But I don't know. It's tough. Sometimes the B stories are tough. Okay, so apparently we have an easy way to remove a Vulcan's abilities to suppress emotions and their telepathic abilities.
Yep.
And you talk sometimes about how we just go a little bit too far with something. And I do think we maybe went a little bit too far with this. As much as I appreciate why they did it and how they needed it in this episode, they needed a way to fix the problem.
Yeah.
But to do it completely against his will when he's unconscious, I think is a step too far.
Really?
Because look at how now you have this humongous vulnerability of the Vulcans that we didn't even know existed before. But it is something that could be used as a weapon.
Well, maybe it's because the Doctor has a complete database of Vulcan physiology and medicine. So he knows...
So maybe he put it together?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's
that could be
a very skilled operation carried out by the Doctor. And plus, remember, he had those little neurosuppressors on the side of his head. So maybe it was, you can only do it if you have that situation. But it does raise the question of a belligerent third party. Could they do that to Vulcans?
To all of them?
Yeah.
Could they, from space, just change all the Vulcans?
Yeah, and then the Vulcans will be carrying out that fertility festival that Neelix was talking about.
Oh, geez. There are just these times on Trek where we do something really extreme.
Yeah.
And I mean, look, last episode was a good example of that, where we just somehow we evolved Tom and Janeway millions of years into the future, but then we went, everything's fine. We're back to normal.
We broke the warp barrier. No big deal.
Yeah. But everything, it's all back to normal. It's fine. There are times where that's just sort of funny and you just move on. And
it's part of Trek.
Yeah. But I think this is an example of it where that's, I I don't know that we should have been able to do that so easily. And if you think about in Prodigy,
yes,
something similar happens with Dal in the first season where we just like change his DNA and just like, he starts changing and evolving physically. And then at the end, it's like, that's fine. We fixed it. He's back to normal.
He's good.
Yeah.
I will counter that as Dal is a genetically engineered organism in the first place.
Spoiler alert.
That's just completely natural for him. So he has ways of getting around it.
It's just such a Star Trek thing, and we have made full use of it in Voyager so far.
Oh, yeah.
My last overanalysis point is something we talked about. I want to say it was in season 6 of Deep Space Nine, but it may have been sooner. And that's the roller coaster of these Trek seasons, especially when they're so long.
Yeah.
And the tonal shift from one episode to the next it can be so jarring, especially when you're going through them quickly, because sometimes we do watch them quicker than once a week, or certainly now we're releasing every other week, but we are watching much quicker than that. And the tonal shift between Threshold and this is pretty funny.
Right.
We were laughing our heads off, and then we have this episode, and it's just like, this is not funny.
Well, this happens so frequently with Deep Space Nine. Remember, like, there was the Leprechaun episode. Was it Wishes Were Horses?
Oh, with Rumpelstiltskin.
Right. And then 2 episodes later, we have Duet.
Oh, yeah. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And in season 6, we had Far Beyond the Stars, which was intense and serious.
Oh,
and then
fantastic.
The next episode was One Little Ship, where they shrunk the ship. Remember how funny that was?
Oh, that was, yes. I mean, that wasn't bad. It was just funny and goofy.
It was such an extreme tonal shift. And we talked about that a lot. And you don't get that today in Trek because, I mean, you do a little bit sometimes, only in the ones that are not serialized.
Yeah.
Discovery told one big story a season generally. And Strange New Worlds is a little bit different because it is more episodic. And so they will sort of dip in the goofy ones a little bit, but they can't afford to be as goofy because they don't have that many episodes.
Yeah.
So I just thought this was a perfect example of the Star Trek roller coaster.
Classic example.
Yeah. Then if I go to Women in the Future, I don't think I had anything in Women in the Future, not much about women in this episode. And for Janeway's Leadership Corner, I think there's a couple of things.
Yeah.
I mean, we've already talked about it quite a bit. There's certainly this really deep, intense failing from Chakotay. And look, I know I harp on about him, and this isn't just because I don't like that character. This is a bad example of leadership.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating to me because I frequently talk about how a lot of things that I learned about leadership, I think have a basis in Star Trek. And it certainly wasn't from Chakotay. But he's doing a disservice to the crew by not fixing these broken relationships that he has.
Yeah.
And it's not just because, with Tom, for example, it's not just because he's snarky with Tom and Tom is snarky back with him. That's not the problem. I mean, that's not cool, but that's not the problem.
Yeah.
The problem is the follow-on impact. All of the people who see that, that's the problem. And the Maquis think, oh, that's the way I'm supposed to behave. That's the right thing to do with the Starfleet crew, right? Is just utter disdain. That's disrespect. That's okay. And so he's not just being snarky to Tom. He is doing a disservice to his entire crew, to his captain, everybody. And that really frustrates me.
And a bad example to the Maquis.
And I wish Janeway would just kick him in the butt about it. But anyway, and then if we talk a little bit about Janeway and Tuvok in this episode, I don't think I have any real notes about what she should have done differently. It was really interesting to me to watch how she reacted to the whole thing because they've worked really hard to convince us that she believes Tuvok is a friend, a confidant, someone she can rely on, someone she can trust.
Yes.
And there have been moments where he has done something rash, which he logicked his way out of, and that really hurt her, right? And then in this moment, he did something a little bit rash, but it wasn't necessarily specifically to hurt her. But the outcome of it was that she was worried that she was going to lose him.
Yeah.
And what I liked about the way that she handled all of this in this episode is never once did it seem like she was faltering on her ideals or faltering on, you know, what she was trying to do. Instead, she was just like, we are not going to execute that guy. That's not what Starfleet does.
Yeah.
And you are going to get your act together and we're going to fix you. And she did everything. It's almost like the thing we've talked about with her third rule of captaining, which hasn't come up yet on Voyager, but it's come up on Prodigy. Never leave a crew member behind. That's what this was to me. This was her not leaving a crew member behind. I'm not just going to kick him out and just move on. It's like, no, I'm going to do everything I can to fix it.
Not maroon him on an asteroid.
Exactly. So I just thought this was a good example of, a good consistent example of Janeway leadership.
The other thing that sprung to mind in this episode with Janeway's reaction to the "we don't execute people, Mr. Tuvok" was one of the Deep Space Nine episodes where they ran into a race that executed their criminals.
The Passenger, season 1.
And the reaction of Sisko and the way Avery Brooks played that of like this absolute horror at the idea of it.
Yeah.
This reminded me of that, of the sort of, this is not our value set.
Yeah, this is just not what we do. Okay, let's move on then to rating. Thumbs up, thumbs down, or neutral. What is your rating?
Absolute 2 thumbs up. This is one of those episodes that I didn't need to rewatch it to give an analysis on it. I remember this episode so well. I thought it was brilliantly acted, and I watched it many times since. This is the episode, I think, where really the skill of Tim Russ comes out.
Mm-hmm.
Brad Dourif is perfect in this role. And the way the two of them, halfway through when they do the switch, and they're like playing each other's characters, and they're pulling it off, and it works so well. A great storyline. I know you didn't like the B story, but I also like the sort of the B side of it, of there's a problem with Tom if he could slide back into his old ways very easily. And I kind of like that aspect of it, even if Chakotay failed to address it correctly. Overall, everything about this episode, this is one of my top Voyager episodes. And also, this isn't the last time we'll see Lon Suder.
Oh, spoiler alert. So, this is your favorite episode so far, would you say?
This is absolutely my favorite episode so far.
Interesting. Well, I'll give it a thumbs up. I didn't remember it. I don't remember anything.
Yeah.
I'm ridiculous. I don't know. I think it's really good, especially when you peel back the onion, as I talked about before, right? There's lots of different layers to it, lots of different ways to look at it. I don't think I liked it quite as much as you did.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because I didn't like the B story, but no, I agree. It's a good episode. Thumbs up. Performances are really good. And it's Worm Tongue, for God's sake.
It's great when they bring in a heavyweight of somebody who can really deliver a solid performance as the guest star. And you couldn't wish for better than this. I mean, he was absolutely terrifying.
And this is a good episode of when Star Trek can tell a really big story, but just sort of contained within a few walls.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in the pitch dark. Yes. So weird how dark this episode is. I think they lost their lighting guy that week or something.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because as we were recording, this is the weekend of the Bell Riots. So that was, one of the episodes you brought up as one of the great examples of Star Trek telling a huge story in, 2 rooms?
Well, in a rundown DMV, remember?
Yes. Right.
And it's, any clown who tells you there's no politics in Star Trek has never watched it.
Oh, yeah.
It's everywhere in Star Trek. Okay, I think that wraps up Season 2, Episode 16. Come back next time for Episode 17. In the meantime, if you'd like to send us your own overanalysis of this or any episode, or if you just want to say something nice, you can email us at rebingeit@gmail.com. You can also find us on Threads, Instagram, and YouTube at ReBingeIt. And you can join the Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/Star Trek TTM podcasts.
Thanks for joining us on the ReBinge Star Trek Voyager podcast.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.